can Ukraine actually win this war? That's what some people would want you to believe. That if only the US government would just give them a little bit more money, that they could win this war. But how accurate is that? How accurate is that? Well, let's find out, shall we? We're going to go to this article in Politico from Jamie Detmer. The West's failure to send weapons to Kiev is putting Putin on course for victory. Can you believe it? It's all our fault, guys. If we would just send them more weapons, if we would just send them more money, everything would be fine. Again, from Jamie Detmer, this was published today, April 17th, 2024. Just ask a Ukrainian soldier if he still believes the West will stand by Kiev, quote, for as long as it takes, end quote. That pledge rings hollow when it's been 4 weeks since your artillery unit last had a shell to fire, as one serviceman complained from the front lines. It's not just that Ukraine's forces are running out of ammunition. Western delays over sending aid mean the country is dangerously short of something even harder to supply than shells. The fighting spirit required to win. Well, at least you're admitting it. Morale among troops is grim, ground down by relentless bombardment, a lack of advanced weapons, and losses on the battlefield. In cities hundreds of miles away from the front, the crowds of young men who lined up to join the army in the war's early months have disappeared. Nowadays, eligible would-be recruits dodge the draft and spend their afternoons in nightclubs instead. Many have left the country altogether. Nobody wants to fight this war. As I discovered while reporting from Ukraine over the past month, the picture that emerged from dozens of interviews with political leaders, military officers, and ordinary citizens was one of a country slipping towards disaster. Even as President Volodymyr Zelensky says Ukraine is trying to find a way not to retreat, military officers privately accept that more losses are inevitable this summer. The only question is how bad they will be. Vladimir Putin has arguably never been closer to his goal. Quote, we know people are flagging, and we hear it from regional governors and from the people themselves. Andriy Yermak, Zelensky's powerful chief of staff, told Politico. Yermak and his boss traveled together to, quote, some of the most dangerous places to rally citizens and soldiers for the fight, he said. Quote, we tell people your name will be in the history books. Yeah. Isn't that sad? Like, they hear it from regional governors, from the people themselves. And they're still like, hey, will you sign up to die? Because, we know you're going to die. So your name is going to be in the history books. We can guarantee you that. If the tide doesn't turn soon in this third year of Russia's invasion, it will be the nation of Ukraine as it currently exists that is consigned to the past. For a war of such era-defining importance, the scale of Western leaders' actions to help Kiev repel Russia's invaders has fallen far short of their soaring rhetoric. That disappointment has left Ukrainians of all ranks, from the soldiers digging trenches to ministers running the country, weary and irritable. When Politico asked Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba if he felt the West had left Ukraine to fight with one hand tied behind its back, his verdict was clear. Quote, yes, I do, he said in an interview in his office an hour after another Russian mid-morning missile attack. Zelensky has laid out the stakes even more starkly, saying Ukraine, quote, will lose the war if the U.S. Congress does not step up and supply aid. Increasingly, it looks as if Putin's bet that he can grind down Ukrainian resistance and Western support might pay off. Without a major step change in the supply of advanced Western weapons and cash, Ukraine won't be able to liberate the territories Putin's forces now hold. That will leave Putin free to gnaw on the wounded country in the months or years ahead. Even if Russia can't finish Ukraine off, a partial victory will leave Kiev's hopes of joining the EU and NATO stuck in limbo. The ramifications of such an outcome will be serious for the world. Putin will claim victory at home, and emboldened by exposing Western weaknesses, he may reinvigorate his wider imperial ambitions abroad. Oh no! Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia are especially fearful. They're next on his hit list. China, already an increasingly reliable partner for Moscow, will see few reasons to alter its stance. So, I just want to pause here really quick and say Jamie Detmer is a piece of shit and is a warmongering motherfucker, because this is nothing but war propaganda right here, okay? You are seeing that people in Ukraine don't want to fight this war. There are so many hints along the way that this is not winnable. But he still wants to say, oh, it's going to leave Kiev's hopes of joining the EU and NATO stuck in limbo. Putin has already said that if Ukraine enters NATO, he will be forced to use nuclear weapons. So I'm sorry, but that's not going to happen. The Ukraine is not going to join NATO. These motherfuckers are delusional. And of course, they have to say, hey, if he wins here, he's going to keep going. Putin's big target is Ukraine's second largest city. Right now, Ukraine's most urgent need is for artillery shells. Millions of them. Ooh, say that 5 times fast. Artillery shells. Millions of them. Moreover, Ukraine says it needs at least 24 Patriot air defense systems to protect troops on the front lines and to defend Kharkiv, the country's biggest city after Kiev, which has been under ferocious missile and artillery attack for weeks. You see again? You see how Jamie Detmer is doing war propaganda? By putting in his piece what freaking air defense systems the Ukrainians want? Fears are growing that Russia may target Ukraine's second city for a ground offensive soon. Quote, it's symbolic because they say that Kharkiv was the first capital of Ukraine. It's a big target, end quote. Zelensky said in an interview with Politico's parent company, Axel Springer media outlets last week. Remember, Axel Springer is the one that makes money off of West Bank settlement ads that we covered before. Ukraine's military is braced for more losses in the coming months. Alexander Syrskyi, commander-in-chief of the armed forces, has warned that the situation on Ukraine's eastern front has, quote, significantly deteriorated in recent days. As Zelensky himself put it elsewhere, quote, we are trying to find some way not to retreat. The fears about the fragility of the front lines are only compounded by an unprecedented barrage of Russian attacks intended to knock out Ukraine's electricity networks. In recent meetings with Politico, the country's political leaders acknowledged that public spirits are sagging. And although they all tried to stay upbeat, frustration with the West came through in every conversation. Oh. Give us damn patriots, snapped Kuleba, Ukraine's chief diplomat, sitting for an interview in the foreign ministry. He couldn't hide his exasperation with the delays and the strings that come attached to Western weaponry, like not striking Russian oil facilities. Yeah, because you see, even though the U.S. is trying to play this war against Russia with its proxy Ukraine, it still doesn't want to go all the way. Because it's Russia. Kuleba, of course, offered his unconditional gratitude for all the support that has come from the Western allies over the past 2 years, but he warned that Ukraine is trapped in a vicious cycle. The weapons it needs are withheld or delayed. Then Western allies complain that Kiev is on the retreat, making it less likely they'll send more aid in the future. Since Politico's meeting with Kuleba, Germany has agreed to supply Patriots, but the question still remains whether they will prove sufficient. They've gotten used to mama's teat. The mood in the senior ranks of the military is even darker than Kuleba's. Several senior officers talked to Politico only on the understanding they would not be named so they could talk freely. Yeah. Maybe not survive otherwise. They painted a grim forecast of front lines potentially collapsing this summer, when Russia, with greater weight of numbers and a readiness to accept huge casualties, launches its expected offensive. Perhaps worse, they expressed private fears that Ukraine's own resolve could be weakened, with morale in the armed forces undermined by a desperate shortage of supplies. Ukrainian commanders are crying out for more combat soldiers. One estimate from the former top commander, Valery Zaluzny, suggested they'd need an extra 500,000 troops. I tried to research how many Ukrainians they had already lost, and Google will not give me an official number. They will just give me the number that they've said, which cannot possibly be true. But Zelensky and the Ukrainian parliament are hesitant about ordering a massive fresh call-up. Oh, yeah. Let's hear why. In an interview with Politico, Yermak, the powerful head of the office of the president of Ukraine, offered an important, and to outsiders, perhaps surprising, reason for not launching a mass mobilization. Such a call-up wouldn't have the backing of the people. Zelensky is still, quote, president of the people, he said. Quote, for him, that's very important. And it's very important that the people do something, not just because they're ordered to do it. End quote. And there's the rub. The West has failed to come up with what's needed, and it in turn is undermining Ukraine's will to do what it takes. The country is facing an existential crisis. Putin literally wants to scratch it from the map. And yet there apparently isn't enough public support for a new draft. Young Ukrainians are dodging the military draft. Admittedly, Ukraine is no different from its neighboring European countries, where recent opinion polls suggest large numbers would refuse to be conscripted even if their nations were under attack. But Ukraine is the country at war. An existential fight like this can't be won without mobilizing the entire nation. Why? These people don't stop to think, why don't they want to fight? And yet, as the conflict continues, Ukrainians living in Kiev and the center and the west of the country, away from the front lines, appear in some ways to be ready to put up with war raging in the east, as long as they can get back to their normal lives. Hence, there is draft dodging. Eligible young recruits find other things to do with their time, packing into hipster bars and techno clubs in the late afternoons. Oh boy. They're having avocado toast. That's not going to be good. Vitaly Klitschko, the former heavyweight boxing champion, now serving as Kiev's mayor, said he understood why people wanted to get back to normal, arguing that it's healthy. He told Politico the desire to resume daily activities was an expression of defiance in the face of Putin's attempts to wear the people down. Maybe so, but faced with a relentless enemy driving home its advantage against a badly equipped army of defenders, such a hands-off attitude seems high risk. As Ukraine's ousted chief commander Zaluzny found to his cost, rational warnings that things may not turn out well can get commentators and analysts in trouble. But suspending critical thinking won't win this war either. The West has placed too much faith in sanctions, believing they'd bring Russia to heel. Yeah, those sanctions have not worked at all. There's also been wishful thinking about Russians turning on Putin over casualty figures, or hopes he may be ousted in a Kremlin coup. Instead, Russia's economy has remained resilient, and Putin has strengthened his grip on power. It's true that before launching the 2022 invasion, the Russian leader may have been misled by his bungling intelligence chiefs into believing a short war would offer a quick win. But Putin can afford to wait. Last month, he awarded himself another 6-year term as president. He can settle for a stalemate. Keeping Ukraine stuck between victory and defeat, shut out of both NATO and the EU, would still amount to a win. He's going to do that. The Ukraine will not join NATO. It will not happen. And what would a deadlock conflict do to Ukrainian resilience? The early burst of patriotic fervor, which saw draft centers swamped with volunteers, has evaporated. An estimated 650,000 men of fighting age have fled their country, most by smuggling themselves across the border. 2 years ago, the trains heading out of Ukraine were almost exclusively carrying women, children, and the elderly to seek refuge. This week, around a third of the passengers on one train carrying this correspondent out of the country were men of fighting age. Somehow, they'd managed to get waiver papers to leave. And Jamie seems like disappointed in that. Why aren't you staying to die for this? In Zelensky's presidential office in Bankova Street, his officials insist they are still positive. But that Western aid, especially President Joe Biden's long-delayed $60 billion package of support, can't wait much longer. What would Putin do if Ukraine doesn't get the Western help it needs to win? Quote, he would completely destroy everything, Zelensky told Axel Springer Media. Ukrainian cities will be reduced to rubble. Hundreds of thousands will die, he said. Quote, people will not run away, most of them. And so he will kill a lot of people. So how it will look like a lot of blood, end quote.
Can Ukraine win?
Yes.
What does that look like?
Well, what we've said all along is we want to see Ukraine remain a sovereign, independent, and democratic state that has the ability to defend its sovereign territory and deter aggression. And that's been our aim from the very beginning, and it remains our aim. But yes, they can be successful.
Under oath, he makes a statement like that. Not the first time we believe he has substantially misled and lied under oath. What do you think?
Not the first time, and not the first time he's used the exact same words, because literally just over a year ago, in March 2023, Lloyd Austin went before the same Congress and said that we believe Ukraine has a strong chance of being successful in the upcoming counteroffensive. How did that go? It was a complete disaster. In fact, the counteroffensive is such a disaster that the New York Times recently reported that at the Pentagon, which Lloyd Austin heads, that the counteroffensive was such a failure that the Pentagon doesn't even consider it to be a counteroffensive. It was so bad they can't even use the word counteroffensive to describe it. That's what a failure it was. And that's what Lloyd Austin hid from the public when he went before Congress a year ago and said that they have a strong chance of success. When meanwhile, we learned later on from leaks that came out on those Discord servers, if you remember that, all those leaks, that the Pentagon was privately saying, along with U.S. intelligence, that at best, Ukraine only had a modest chance of success. And the reason was obvious, because Ukraine doesn't have the air power. And if you're going to launch a counteroffensive, you need air power, which Ukraine just doesn't have. Anyone could have predicted that. And Lloyd Austin was lying through his teeth then, and he's lying through his teeth now. Except now it's even worse, because at least back then you could say, all right, maybe this counteroffensive might do something. With all that training, all those people, all that money that was poured into it, it was a complete disaster. So why possibly would it be any better now?
So if the CIA had 12 stationary bases in Ukraine, you would think the Secretary of Defense would know about it. Here's Senator Tuberville again, cut number 12.
I'll pause it there, because I think that is an important thing to remember here, that the United States has been lying about the fact that there's a way to win. And so that's why I wanted to show you this article, because ultimately it amounts to war propaganda. It amounts to war mongering. Ukraine cannot win. There should have been a diplomatic solution to this years ago. But Boris Johnson stopped Zelensky from negotiating that back in 2022. And now probably hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians are dead. 650,000 of them don't want to fight this war. Thank you for watching my content on YouTube. To catch full interviews, get early demos and unreleased songs from me, as well as a whole bunch of other great bonus content, become a member at zavibenjamin.com/Substack, where you can become a monthly, yearly, or inner circle member and support my work. Thank you so much.